This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. You know, no matter how great your ideas are, there's always a chance they've been done before in one way or another. So as soon as you decide what you're going to write about, do a little research. You might actually find out some history or some fun facts you can use in your book. Our first author found that out and was glad she did. Mandy Mazur is in the process of moving to Mississippi from Ohio. She's been writing her whole life, but My Rabbit in the Moon is her first published book.
I was actually a breakfast chef and taking my dogs out in the morning. It was about 4 in the morning before work one day, and I was talking to the rabbit like I do all the time and looking up, and that's when the entire idea for the book hit me. And all my life, I've pointed out the rabbit to so many people, and nobody else had ever seen it until I would point it out, and then they could see it. And then after I wrote the book, I thought it's probably a good idea to Google it. And I was totally floored. In Japan, there is an old folklore story about the rabbit in the moon. The man in the moon coming down and taking the rabbit, who he found to be the kindest animal, and taking the rabbit up to the moon with him. And then after that, I was totally dumbfounded by pictures after pictures after pictures of Aztec and Mayan artifacts depicting the rabbit in the moon. And they likened it to the goddess Astara for fertility. And that is what our Easter bunny came from. And that floored me.
So how's your story go?
It's in like first person from the rabbit and saying, hello, do you see me? I'm up here. And the rabbit is very much like a child because the only knowledge that the rabbit has is what it has seen. That's all it knows. Doesn't know why grass is green, why the sky is blue. I've learned everything I know by simply watching you. And what the rabbit is most interested in is why we feel the way we feel, because it sees us act and react in all of these different ways. It unfolds by talking about the different feelings that everybody has. Then in the end, it says, now that we are friends, you can point to me and proudly say, that's my rabbit in the moon. Remember, I'm watching over you, and we'll talk again very soon.
Kids must love this.
So far, have been just overwhelmed by their reaction. There's a little boy across the street. He'll tell me, I see the rabbit, and I talk to him. I try not to ever put a gender on the rabbit or anything because I want it to be just so inclusive for everybody.
Are you able to read this story to kids?
Oh, absolutely. There's been so much word of mouth, having great responses on Twitter. I've done some book readings and book signings just locally.
Well, that's the best place to start, Mandy. Thank you. Lachman Hardial was born in Guyana, lost her parents when she was just a little girl, was abused by people who were supposed to protect her, and then found her way to Queens, New York, where she's a mom to 2 toddlers and an inspiration to everyone who meets her. She shares her story in her book entitled Never Let Go. So how old were you when you and your brothers lost your parents?
2.5 when my mother died and 3 when my father died, because he died in November of 2001. My mother died in May of 2001. We had like a few cousins living there because my older aunt, she had her husband there. So when we went to say if we could stay, if they would take care of us or take us in, my older brother, they basically just chased us away, so we were left on the streets wandering for food, for water, shelter, everything. In Guyana, I was in school, but I was taken out of school. My brothers and I were taken out to do chores, and that's how come I was being taken advantage of at such a young age. At 5 years old, I was raped by the people we were staying at, by her older son. I came here when I was 7, so very
How
long time.
were you able to get here?
Well, my grandmother, she was able to bring me through people that brought people here into the country.
Wow.
That was the only way she was able to, and she was my rock. And as time goes, being a young girl, you don't really see people for who they are until you grow up and you gain some wisdom, some knowledge. And I found out that they didn't really like me as much as I thought they did.
Your family didn't protect you. I mean, you were raped twice by
No, they never did.
a family
Never did.
member.
Yeah. I didn't mind if she didn't want to put him in jail, because he had kids for her daughter. But the fact that I had to go there, after all this happened, and the thing that bothered me was that I used to have to hug him, and if I didn't, it was a big scene. It was like a bombshell that went off. There was a neighbor that I told what happened, and she had threatened them, if you don't move this child away, I'm gonna have to call the police and tell them what happened. So she told her boss, I'm gonna have to leave because I don't have anyone to take care of my granddaughter that I just bought here. So she's like, no, 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 why don't we see how it goes? I want to meet her. And she just fell in love with us, actually, with me, actually. She's like, I haven't had a child in this house for so long, and I'm really happy to have her. So, and I fell in love with her as well. So I grew up there for 7 years. I finally had a childhood back. I could breathe again. She became my teacher because I didn't know anything. I ended up falling in love with someone that I knew practically my whole life, but was much older than me. But he's the best thing that's happened to me. And today I have to say that, I would never regret anything. So I dedicated the book to him and my 2 kids because they're my biggest inspiration.
Wow, you have some story.
Oh, thank you so much. That means so much to me. Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I just hope things go well for you. Louis Tabor started writing in 2005, but as president of a large corporation, it took some time to put together a trilogy about his life adjusting to Baltimore's inner city as a child and how that experience shaped the rest of his life. The name of his book, Spread Your Wings.
It is about a young boy that's having a nice, comfortable life out in the county, and for economical reasons, he has to move into the city with his parents, and that's a culture shock. You got hoodlums, and it was very traumatic, and then the kid had to adjust if he was going to survive. So then he goes on to get into all kind of trouble. And
How old were you when you moved into Baltimore?
about 12, somewhere around there. Into the inner city, yeah.
What's your most
But
memorable experience?
when I was just there, not long, I loved cowboys when I lived out in the county, and I had, 6 guns and cowboy hat, boots, and everything. And I used to follow all the big cowboys. And my mom said to me, we had a big park, was maybe 3 blocks from our house. She said, well, why don't you go out to the park and play cowboys, and you might meet some friends that like to play cowboys. I said, okay. So I'm walking out there all dressed up in my cowboy boots and hat and all, and I run into a shoe shine boy. And he's, bigger than me, and he asked me what the hell I was supposed to be. And I started telling him, and next thing you know, he beats me up, takes everything, leaves me in my little drawers. He took everything. And then he said, son, you better grow up because we don't have no steers in the city. We only have queers. That woke me up and said, oh, my Lord, you got James or you ain't going to make it here. That was the turning point. This kid got, he got really tough and hard. Yeah.
So really it's a story of survival.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the other books I have written takes you all the way up. The last one is when he's a grown man and he's looking back on how he got to where he was. And all these memories are coming back and how he got to where he was from being a hoodlum in the inner city. It's a realistic picture of what the inner city is like when you're growing up. And this was, back in the mid-50s. Anybody that hasn't gone through that, it would be a culture shock for them. It really would.
Where did you end up going to college?
Well, I went to the University of Baltimore on a lacrosse scholarship. I ran out of money, so I had to give it up and went to work. And then I went back to night school, and then I got drafted and was in the Army. When I come back, I worked for Western Electric, which was part of AT&T. So I got a promotion in Washington, D.C., and got very lucky, met some great people, and moved up the ladder real quick. And they sent me to Wharton Business School for a master's degree. And then University of Pittsburgh, they wanted me to learn international economics, which was a cut. So anyway.
So we learn about that in the books that follow this one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That one picks up where the other one left off. The next one is more about he matures very fast, and he's going to high school, and he meets a girl, and then he's the leader of the gang there in the neighborhood, and and the different things they do to protect the neighborhood, and that's the next one. The things that you have to deal with when you're growing up as a young boy in the inner city. And if you don't get tough, they'll swallow you up.
All right, Louis, thank you. Donna Broughton manages a small government office in Kentucky, and when she had grandchildren, the storytelling began. Her first book, entitled Raised by Polar Bears, is one of the stories she tells to her granddaughters.
I've always loved snow. I've always loved Alaska, and I think polar bears are just adorable. So when my granddaughter was born, I started telling her the story, and I would make the story up as we were talking and playing. And
You used to just make it up as you went along.
correct. So basically, a little girl and her mother and father are going to see Barrow, Alaska, and there's a plane crash, and the little girl is thrown into a snow den of polar bear cubs. And she has her little fuzzy snowsuit on with the little ears. So Mama Bear just takes her in as one of her own.
Because
That's
she
how the
looks like a
story
polar
gets
bear.
because she looks like a little polar bear, yes. And what happens is it's a wonderful journey because everyone else from the plane crash was rescued. I wanted this to be a very uplifting story. So everyone was rescued, of course, except for Cooper, who is the little girl who's named after my father. So she's taken in by Mama and Papa and the two baby bear cubs. And eventually, Mama realizes that she's growing and she can't keep her safe any longer. So she goes in pursuit of this mystical place where polar bears and humans and all kinds of different animals interact with each other and can understand each other. So she is going there to try and get Cooper back to her mother and father.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So we have to read the book to find out.
Yeah.
And they meet, and they have an owl that guides them, right?
Yes, there's a wonderful, beautiful snowy owl called Aurora, and she takes a special interest in Cooper, and so she tells them how to get there, where to go, and the things that they're going to encounter along the way. And so we run across these beautiful creatures, and there's a babbling brook who a lady flows through the water and talks with them as they go through the valley. And there's just such wonderful little characters in it. There's Bree, who's a beautiful butterfly who wears a feather coat and hat, and she has beautiful green eyes with long lashes. And then, of course, we run into Buddy, who is abandoned by a ship that had crashed from the sea, and everybody thinks he's really mean and horrible, but he's really just been hurt really badly, and he has thorns and rocks and things in his little feet. So he needs help, and he's always comes across as being mean. So Mama runs into him and she helps him. So they have all these different characters and creatures along the way. Squirm is one of the ones they first run into, and he has a green eye and a purple eye, and he speaks really fast, and his tail moves really, really fast. He has the body of a worm and a huge bushy tail like a squirrel, so that's where he gets the name Squirm.
I love these characters, and these are just all your imagination.
These are my imagination, absolutely.
Well, nice going, Donna. Looking forward to the next 2 books in the series. We have to take a quick break, but we're coming right back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books, and unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them, and they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
We're back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. If you've ever seen a hospice nurse in action, you know it takes a unique individual to comfort the dying and their family members. It's a job Elizabeth Walters has embraced for 13 years, and she shares her observations in her book entitled Memoirs of a Hospice Nurse.
The book is actually my diary about my work and the people and the patients that I've come across. I wrote it in loving memory of them because some of their stories really tugged at my heartstrings. Okay, I wanted people to know that hospice was not something they needed to be afraid of, that you didn't have to wait until the very end, to go on hospice and then you pass away the next day or a week later. People can benefit from hospice a good 6, 7 months before actual death, because what it does, it helps them to lead a quality of life without aggressive treatments. That's what hospice is. So if a patient, for example, has a terminal diagnosis for cancer and the doctor gives them 6 months or less to live, they can actually go on hospice and continue to do the things they like to do. It's just that they won't have the aggressive chemotherapy treatment. They get visits from social workers, and they get visits from our wonderful volunteers too, who spend time with them at the bedside. And now we have what you call the death doula, which they can stay at the bedside with the patient when they're actually dying, because the philosophy is that no one should die alone. And I wanted people to realize that the hospice team, which is headed by our medical director, also takes care of the family emotionally. So we're there with them, and we're there to provide the support, because a lot of times the families suffer more than the patients themselves, emotionally, that is.
Is that difficult for you?
Oh, yes. I was into my first year and a half into hospice nursing, and I had this young man, 23 years old, and he had this rare form of cancer when he was 16 years old. It was a rare form of lung cancer, and he had fought it bravely, he and his family. But at 23, it had come back with a vengeance. And that really, after I took care of him, I had to take 2 weeks off just to wonder, if this is what I want to do, because I was really broken up about his death. And I wrote about it in my book, just how much he wanted to live. It was a lesson learned, that the younger they are, or the younger an individual is, the harder they fight to stay alive. And of course, with good reason, because no one wants to die, and especially when you're young. The mind is still young and good, but it's the body that's failing. So that was really extremely difficult for me. But with my faith, I am a believer. I was able to press on.
Well, you do great work, Elizabeth, and I thank you for that. Writing is a longtime hobby for R.M. Vermette, who, after working for the federal government in Detroit and caring for her husband, who died of lung cancer in 2010, was finally able to finish her book entitled Ava's Journey, The Bumpy Road to Heaven. It's about her immigrant parents growing up on a multicultural street, the people she meets, and how Ava perseveres in the face of sorrow and tragedy.
Ava is a composite of myself, in a sense. All the stories in it are true, but the dates and the people's names have been changed. But every story in there is a true story, and especially the devastating story on Chapter 12 of Danny, the little boy who was shot to death. But it's a story about immigrants, my parents, about what it was like after the war in Germany. My mother left high school when the Russian and the communists were taking over the Baltic countries. And she fled with a bunch of students to Vienna, Austria. In Vienna, she met my father, who at 16 had been captured by the Nazis and been placed in a labor camp. My father escaped that camp, and he met her, and they got together with people in refugee camps. And my father had an uncle here in America, and they waited and got sponsored and waited for visas while they lived in Augsburg, Germany, where I was born. They came to Detroit, and then Ava, she's a little girl who really is aware of the world around her from the time she's 4 years old, and how she goes through life living on the wrong side of the tracks, goes to Catholic school, and she marries early to get out of her dysfunctional family. But her marriage turns into a nightmare, and she tried to escape that. But her mother, Lily, is the heart of the story because she always was close to her mom, and her picture is on the cover of my book, as is Victor, the father. He came from extreme poverty. His sister died of blood poisoning because they couldn't afford to even call a doctor. They had 6 kids. The mother worked in a cafe. His father was shot down by the Russians. It's a tapestry of a lot of things that they brought with them to America. And Victor became a very, very high patriot. He loved this country, but he kind of got corrupted also, and Lily suffered through it all. And Ava watched all this.
So we get stories about all of these interesting people that she comes into contact with in this book. So that sets us up for the second book, right?
Yes, and beautiful Detroit is the essence of the book, too. And the children's fantasy land, Boblo Island, which was every child's dream every summer. And the children that Ava befriends, her lifelong friends, where finally Ava escapes into an 18-year-old marriage, which fails, and she grows up very fast because she couldn't conceive a baby for 8 years, and then she meets a man that changes her life, but it doesn't change it for good. It's really a story about all different types of people, because in Ava's neighborhood, everybody knew each other. Everybody watched the children. I grew up in an era where the neighbors yelled at the kids if they were in the street.
Right.
Today, nobody cares,
Yeah.
It's a wonderful story of Americana in the early 50s and 60s, but it also is a story how the 70s changed the world.
Finally, Dwight McGarrah Sr. is a disabled vet and now author of Looking into the Mind of a Lost but Found Soul. It's the first in a series of 4 books. Oddly enough, he started writing just days before his mother passed away, just shy of her 101st birthday. And his hope is by sharing his story, he can help others.
This was just something that happened. I wasn't trying to write a book or anything. My mother was president of Alpha Kappa Alpha, the first black sorority in America. She got her master's degree in 1958. And I was going through something within myself. I was having an internal battle, and I couldn't understand it. And a friend of mine told me that my mother was transferring her spirit into me. My mother and father was together my whole life until I went in the Marine Corps, so pretty stable. My mother was a school teacher. She was a minister. She had a lot of positivity in her. And someone told me that I had a lot of devil in me at one time. And she transferred her spirit as she knew it was time to go home. And she transferred her spirit into me. And I started writing 10 days before she passed. That's how it all came about. And so I wrote a book and sent it in to Page Publishing, and now I'm an author.
So what's it about?
The book is about my little journey. I did a lot of things, prison, Marine Corps, church, drugs, everything. As my mother was passing, those things wasn't good for me. At the time, I thought they was good for me. Living in the darkness, it was good. But as God started bringing me to the light, because I feel my mother prayed real hard for me. I just got out here and got lost in these streets.
So you had a good family, you had a good upbringing, and
Yes.
It was when you left home that things kind of fell apart.
When I was young, I would go, Dad, because my dad was always home. He would try to tell me, I said, Dad, why I can't be in the streets? He'd go, because there's nothing out there for you. So I'm the only child, so I was kind of spoiled, but I couldn't have a lot of friends and I couldn't hang out. All they was doing was protecting me. So I think I had something in my head where I didn't really know what love was. And I really didn't understand tough love. And sometimes we all need tough love. And now I know I'm like, people say, you like the prodigal son. I'm on my way home. It's not the physical home. It's the heavenly home. When I got there, I did everything. I did almost every drug it was back then. Went to prison 5 times. Been to jail probably 100 times. After all the drugs, all them drugs killed brain cells. And after the end of the day, God gave me the ability to write a book to help somebody. And this morning, a friend of mine said his niece was going through something. She had to go to a facility and all that. And she came and saw my book and read my book. He said ever since she read my book, she's been going back to church. Haven't been that long, but she's been going back to church and saying, so my objective was to try to help somebody, maybe not go through what I went through, or if they're going through something, maybe help them. That's what my plans are, to get out. And I want to give some people, where I'm going in the ghettos and stuff, some people might not have even $15 to buy a book. So my thing is to give some people some books, because it's to help people, not to try to get all their money.
All right, Dwight. Well, your heart's in the right place. Thank you. And that's all the time we have for now. Thanks to our authors for sharing their stories, and thank you for hanging out with us here on the Page Publishing Book Club. If you missed anything, don't forget you can download the podcast at 710WOR.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini.